welcome to The Stockout. The Stockout is your show at FreightWaves for all things related to the consumer packaged goods industry, the CPG industry. I'm your host, Mike Baudendistel. I'm the head of intermodal solutions here at FreightWaves. I do some on the data side and also some on the media side. And today, in the CPG industry, we're going to be talking to Phil Schmidbauer, who's the senior director of analytics at ODW Logistics. It's a third-party logistics company that specializes in working with shippers in a number of different verticals, including the food and beverage. So we'll learn about what he's seeing in the marketplace, how a logistics company can help CPG companies. We'll hear about that a little bit later. But first, I'll just do one news story, which is really one of the big news stories right now is the ILWU Canada port worker strike in Western Canada and British Columbia is now in its 10th day. We have a lot of good material on freightwaves.com and on YouTube related to this situation. This is one article I'm showing on the screen here, written by Greg Miller, published on Friday. Says over 20 ships now wait off of the ports of Canada as the dock worker strike drags on, which is now in its 10th day. He outlines that there's now about 23 vessels waiting off of the British Columbia ports, including 8 container ships, 7 bulkers, 1 general cargo ship, 4 container ships off of the port of Prince Rupert, which is up in northern British Columbia, and then 3 additional ships further offshore. One additional point that was incremental to me, at least, from Sal Modigliano on the roundtable this morning was that the strike does not pertain to grain or ore shipments. Those are protected by Canadian law from going on strike. So really primarily dealing with container ship operations there. And you can see it in all sorts of different data within Sonar. We have a product that deals specifically with ocean shipping called the Container Atlas product. And this one chart in particular kind of stands out just in the last few days. So what we're looking at here is the Ocean TEU rejection index. And so just like, tender rejections we talk about on the trucking side, these are rejections for containers where the container ship line is saying no to a shipment. And those have been pretty low up until the strike situation sort of set aside the spike in mid-April, which actually wasn't too far removed from when the contract expired with the ILWU Canada at the end of March. But in the latest data point, it went from about 6%, ocean carriers rejecting about 6% of inbound Vancouver loads to over 10%. And you have to keep in mind, these are mostly loads coming from Asia, so it is a couple week transit time there, and it could be another week lead time before the containers are loaded in China. So it does suggest that at least some of the container ships lines are not sending as many vessels to the U.S. I know John McCown on the FreightWaves TV roundtable this morning said he did hear about one container ship that actually turned around and went back to China, which is an unusual situation for sure. Also had a good discussion this morning with Lorianne LaRocco on FreightWaves TV. Bill Priestley moderated that, and Anthony Smith moderated that. You can go check that out on YouTube. But some of the bullet points there, really kind of pessimistic, actually, as far as any resolution getting, coming to fruition anytime in the immediate future, at least. She said it would take the Canadian Parliament at least 3 days to get back in session. And it doesn't sound like there's a political will right now to force an immediate end, even though it's having a tremendous impact on the Canadian economy. So no sort of firm timeline for resolution. And another thing that came out of the discussion this morning on FreightWaves TV is, John McCown was talking about how the impact of Vancouver relative to U.S. ports, said, you sort of put that in context versus the U.S. West Coast ports, of course, much smaller, but still about 21% of what the U.S. West Coast volume would be. And then you sort of look at the portions that are destined for U.S. consumption centers, if that's really what you're concerned about. And it would be more like a 6% of what U.S. West Coast imports would be. So still a tremendous impact, particularly the containers coming through the port of Prince Rupert, which about 60% of that freight comes to U.S. Consumption on Canadian National. A lot of that goes directly from Prince Rupert to Chicago or Prince Rupert all the way to Memphis before going onward from there. So would encourage you to keep it tuned to FreightWaves.com and FreightWaves TV and check updates on FreightWaves Sonar to see the impact of the ongoing ILWU Canada strike in British Columbia. With that, I want to bring on today's guest to talk about CPG companies directly. So I'm going to intro today's guest. It's Phil Schmidbauer. He's the senior director of analytics and solutions at ODW Logistics. That's a third-party logistics company that specializes in that specialties that include lean supply chain management, operations management, carrier management, logistics design, and process improvement. Phil, if we have you, thank you for joining me on the Stock Out.
Yeah, I'm all here. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Good to see you. I know you've been on other shows on FreightWaves TV. The only difference here is we're just dealing specifically with CPG companies, at least the issues that they care the most about. And maybe just to start, why don't you just give us a little bit of an overview of ODW for those who aren't familiar and the services that you provide?
Yeah, so ODW Logistics, we're a third-party logistics provider, and we like to work with companies on their entire supply chain, right? So we have warehousing and contract logistics, and then our logistics management and transportation management, and we really work together to help optimize the supply chains as a whole, and not just looking at one segment of it, but really working together for the customer to help optimize not only inside the four walls of the warehouse, but what's coming inbound to the warehouse, and then the outbound shipments to a lot of retailers. We do a lot of different segments of business, but a large retail consolidation that we're building and shipping outbound from Columbus, Ohio market today.
Great. So right up the alley of a lot of CPG companies, we're interested in that retail consolidation. If maybe just to kick it off here, as far as what are you seeing right now in the freight marketplace? And you talked to a lot of shippers, like carriers. Do have a chart from Sonar that's kind of interesting, just in that see in the white line there is contract rates on average, excluding fuel surcharges. And blue, we have spot rates excluding fuel surcharges. Of course, there's been a big gap between those two of them for really over a year. But what's kind of interesting is you see that blue line for spot rates. It's kind of increased in June, right at the end of the quarter. Do you think that is maybe related to just the end of the quarter surge, or are you seeing anything more substantial in the freight marketplace that could signal a turnaround?
Yeah, not really. I mean, to your point, I think there might be a little change. I don't know that it's going to sustain. We saw the little blip back at the beginning of the year as well, and things continued to drop. So I don't know, but this is actually a graph that we use a lot, and we talk to our customers a lot. And it's all about helping them understand the difference between the two. Like, we can go chase rate all day long, but you got to be careful that you're not burning bridges and relationships with your carriers that are keeping you up and stable. Right. So you look at like inbound lanes that are dedicated, and we've been working with carriers and saying, hey, look, you can see the gap. We see the gap in rates between the contract rates and the spot rates. We need to work together here to make sure we can keep you on the business, but we got to give the customer some cost relief, right? It's where the market is. So it's definitely a delicate balance, as data has been invaluable to us, helping us have those conversations with our customers. But again, I go back to the same things that I always say on these shows, is that relationships matter, and you have to build good, solid relationships, and you have to communicate with people effectively. And really, that's what it boils down to, both talking to your carriers and talking to customers.
Yeah. So how can a shipper maintain that relationship? I mean, right now, a shipper can say all they want. Okay, we're going to give you this freight at a better rate than you could get out in the marketplace. Maybe that we could, we're not going to, take every bit of cost out. We'll give you a decent rate on the contract rate, but in exchange, we want to be taken care of when this thing eventually turns, and it will turn. We don't know when, but it will. So how can a CPG company sort of maintain that relationship?
I think it started back during COVID, right? When everything was absolutely crazy with COVID. And I think a lot of shippers learned their lesson that, like, you can't just go chasing the spot market rates all the time, right? You have to build relationships with the carriers. You have to use the same, use that relationship and build on it. So, what our thing is all about outperforming an index. So if there's an index on the spot market, and we have spot market freight, we try to beat that index. If there's a contract market, we're trying to beat that index, or at least help educate our customers and saying, look, like, you want to be taken care of now, because when COVID happens again, these are the carriers that we built relationships with during COVID. We have to take care of them, because if something like COVID happens again, you're going to be left in the dust. And you guys know from an international standpoint, and a big segment of our business that grew over COVID was container rescue, rescuing containers from the ports when the ports couldn't get it done. It cost an absolute fortune to get it done for customers, but guess what cost more? Not having freight in the retailers. When you can't fill the shelves at Walmart and Target and other retail locations, your freight might as well be worthless. So for us, it was all about helping customers get freight to the shelves during that time. And again, it's going back and having those conversations about making sure we're building relationships with carriers and our customers to leverage the marketplace as best we can without overly taking advantage of carriers and vice versa.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess on that point, that's one way that, goods company can prevent some of these fees from retailers and not having shelves that aren't stocked and those things. Any other strategies you have to eliminate these on-time and full fees?
Yeah, so there's a couple different strategies I've seen people take over the last few years. There's some companies that we've done business with in the past, and they wanted to expand their footprint, have more DCs, be closer to the Walmart DCs or the Target DCs, and they wanted to have more shipping locations. And my personal experience with those companies is then they struggle from having the right inventory in the right places, and inventory can often be expensive. So if you have a limited SKU base and you have very inexpensive inventory, then maybe that's a good strategy. But when you have inventory that costs you a lot of money and a lot of capital outlay, and you have a lot of different variation in your SKU mix and the demand of those SKUs, sometimes simplifying your supply chain is better. So we had a customer that was in one of our DCs out in the West Coast in California and in the Midwest. They previously had 3 nodes. They had Columbus, Missouri, and California, and they got rid of the Missouri because it was about simplifying the network, lowering the outlay of cash they had to have in inventory. And then we brought them into one DC on Columbus, and we're consolidating the freight. And really, we were able to mitigate most of the cost increase you would expect from freight because of optimization and being able to optimize their freight better. So we took an average of, I think it was like 24,000 pounds on their given truckload, and it's now up over 32,000 pounds on average over the truckloads. And there's times where you just have to hit on time, right? So you might have a 20,000 pound truck, but it's all about, and I've always believed this. I had an old boss that said, if we had glass sides on the trucks going down our highways today, we would be embarrassed as a country to see what happens and how much air we ship on a daily basis. And that's where our focus is, right? Because you can have the best rate per mile on a lane, but if that truck is half empty, I'll call it, you're basically wasting your money. You might as well pay 2x the lane rate. So our goal is really to optimize what's going on that trucks and shipping out to the retailers.
Yeah, so there's optimization. It seems like there's lots of different sort of levels to this optimization. Having full truckloads instead of not full truckloads, potentially using truckload instead of LTL, which I know is something that you have some thoughts on, and then maybe using intermodal units instead of truckload when there's an opportunity and maybe it's not time sensitive enough. What do you think about those modal conversion opportunities? And do you think there's opportunities to do those things as well?
Yeah, so there's definitely an opportunity to do it. To your point around time sensitivity, right? Intermodal, generally, if you have a long haul coming inbound and you can build up some inventory in your warehouse before shipping out to the customers, it might make sense to take the cost advantage of intermodal. Although the intermodal spot market has been, it's just you have to be in the right lanes for it to make sense these days, depending on where you're bringing freight into. And really, optimization is all about everything you just stated, right? What's the right time to bring something from LTL onto truckload? Maybe it even costs you a little bit more, but you have better reliability on your on time, right? Because where some of these retailers will really get you is if you're not on time, the fees might outweigh the cost you're saving in transportation. So it's a delicate balance, and not only talking about what's going on the trucks, but we try to optimize the way orders are written as well. So Walmart is one thing. Walmart's invested a lot of money into a system that helps consolidators build those loads and bring it inbound because they understand the value of it. Other retailers have not understood how to do that. So we sometimes work with our customers and say, hey, you've got this same person writing an order for you in Pennsylvania on a Monday and a Thursday. Can we just ship those together and deliver at the same time? And guess what? The customer, generally, the retailer is happy to do that because it actually saves them a dock appointment and bringing that freight in on a weekly basis. So again, we're looking at the entire supply chain, also looking at how to leverage the warehouse. So building efficiencies for the warehouse so that they're not picking 10,000 cases today and 30,000 cases tomorrow. So as a transportation planning organization, we're working with our warehouse very closely to help plan their manpower, plan the outbound shipping schedule, all while helping manage the on time and in full percentage at these retail locations.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more collaborative and strategic relationship with the shippers. It's not like the traditional broker model where you're just, this is today's transaction. It's really an ongoing relationship that's very in depth. Um, I mean, you mentioned warehousing. What are you seeing in the warehousing market right now? If those rates come down with the building and with the softening freight market?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, keeping in mind that warehousing is, there's a lot of leases or 3-year leases or 5-year leases for a lot of stuff. And that's what we deal with as longer term leases, right? So there has been some space open and available at certain locations. You can see in the news where Amazon may have slowed down some of the more regional DCs, and they're kind of consolidating back into maybe some more regional instead of local DCs. I'm sorry. So, maybe a little bit. I don't know that you're seeing rates necessarily drop through the floor or anything, but it has softened a little bit over the past, say, 6 months or so. And who knows what the future is going to hold. But I think COVID taught us a lot about that. I think people are starting to dwindle down their inventory that they had built up shortly after COVID. So we have seen a little bit, but I wouldn't say that rates are dropping through the floor.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, some of those longer term leases, I mean, they just haven't rolled over yet and need to roll over. They'll be repriced lower. I also wanted to ask you one of the hot topics of the hour: Yellow, the cat that has 9 or maybe 900 lives. If that were, you do a lot with LTL. If that were to go out of business, what's your plan there?
Yeah, so I mean, our plan is we have multiple different carrier relationships, right? So we're very close with Yellow. We use them as a partner, and we're staying close to the situation. But we've got a lot of different carriers we use. Another thing is we always try to optimize onto truckload, right? So there's always that option. The same thing happened during COVID when we had capacity constraints. We're utilizing our truckload carriers. We might move stuff to intermodal. And the market sees those shifts as well. So you're already seeing people's freight shift off of Yellow. People are worried about it. And we're talking to our customers and communicating with them to make sure that they understand, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we're seeing. There's articles coming out on a daily basis. There was another one today, kind of where the creditors have given them a little bit more time to work through the issues with the union. But, there's all kinds of union negotiations going on. And it seems like on an annual basis or every other year. So it's the same kind of process. We're planning accordingly, being responsible with our discussions with both our partners as in carriers and our customers to say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we know. Everything else is speculation. So what do we want to do to make sure our customers are protected? And we're just open with our carriers. And we've talked to Yellow a lot and said, hey, we're going to work with you, but we need to make sure that we protect our customers' freight as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Really have to protect the customers and really sort of keep them informed and all those things. You want to ask you, I mean, you say on your website, food and beverage is one of the areas of expertise, one of the verticals you do a lot with. What are some of the maybe specific issues that those companies, run into and how do you help mitigate those?
Yeah, so we've seen so many issues over the past few years that we've dealt with, right? That when you have food, you've got food grade facilities, things like that. You got the FDA sometimes that might come in and find an issue with a recall. So now we've got a reverse logistics plan that we've got to put in place to get product back from certain locations should that happen. The challenges are never ending. And it's one of the, kind of one of the reasons that I got into supply chain a long time ago. I had a professor at Central Michigan that in 2002, when I graduated, he had just got done coordinating the 9/11 efforts in New York City. And he did a presentation on it. And one thing that hit me is like, you know what? We'll never be out of a job as logisticians because there's always going to be problems. Products always have to move. And until we start to teleport products across the United States, there's just going to constantly be challenges. It's kind of like having my 3 boys at home. Like there's always something it's like whack-a-mole. Someone's always in trouble. But that's what the supply chain is like. You never know what kind of issues you're going to run into. And it's one of the things that I love about the job is there's a new challenge every day. So whether it's a recall or maybe it's labor shortages in a certain market or something like COVID, where we're having to come up with some crazy ways to get their product off of container ships and into their warehouses. There's just nonstop challenges with customers, whether it be food related or not.
Have you seen anything innovative that you would call out to build resiliency into supply chain? I mean, it seems like that's kind of what a lot of these companies are trying to do right now is, we had all these issues during COVID. We didn't have the right ingredients. We didn't have the packaging. We didn't have the people. We didn't have the manufacturing capabilities. Any sort of creative things there on supply chain resiliency?
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody talks about that and trying to understand what that means. It's like, how do you guarantee you're going to have labor available in a market like that, right? During COVID or something like that. So it's, again, I kind of go back to number of nodes you're managing and simplifying your business. The more SKUs you have, the more locations you have to manage, the more complexity you build into your business, the more difficult it's going to be to manage during chaos. And so I don't know that I've seen anything technology-wise that's going to drive that. A lot of it is visibility and planning. I think about us. We literally, our president John, came to us quite a few months before COVID and said we need to start ordering laptops in case we all have to go remote. And we kind of thought he was crazy at the time. And here we are a few short weeks after that, like the entire office within a couple of weeks is fully remote, still managing transportation for customers, et cetera. So, a little bit of foresight and understanding, but I think it's just planning and making sure you have a contingency plan in place for when things do go wrong is really the key.
Yeah, that reducing the number of SKUs, I've definitely seen that a lot in the CPG industry where they've cut the SKUs that weren't moving. I mean, some of the CPG companies will say, well, if we cut customers' SKU, we have so many different brands at different price points, they'll just go and buy one of our other SKUs. So you do see that degree of simplification. And I guess in terms of simplification, in terms of the number of 3PLs that a company uses, what are the sort of advantages of just going with one versus multiple?
Yeah, so to me, it's all about partnerships, right? And so we see this in our warehouse. We have certain warehouse customers where we might be managing part of the transportation and another 3PL is managing the other part of the transportation. And really the challenges are managing the flow of product in the warehouse, right? Because we might be planning half the orders and we're not able to level load the entire workflow of the warehouse employees and how many cases they can pick a day and stuff like that, right? So it takes more communication as well as system connectivity, right? Now you have more systems in the mix when you're trying to do integrations and stuff of that nature. So, it's easy for me to say, well, you really need to go with one 3PL that you trust, right? That's really easy to say, but really the results for us are shown when we actually start working with customers and actually show them, hey, we can help level load these issues as a combined integrated solution that we provide for our customers in retail. Our happiest customers are the ones that are using ODW warehousing and transportation because we provide that level of problem solving, right? We can move around. If the warehouse is having a bad day or they've got some call-offs or whatever, we can help them move around and plan freight accordingly to help accommodate some of those things that might happen in their business, and vice versa. When maybe they have capacity and they can get ahead a little bit, we can help them understand, okay, here are the orders that you need to pick to get ahead. So that tomorrow you can have, we can level out the load coming tomorrow. So really understanding the entire supply chain and optimizing not only the freight, which a lot of people don't do well. You'd be amazed at how many trucks I see go out or how many orders I'll see where Tuesday and Thursday there's an order going to the same destination and they just ship it on two separate LTLs. Even shipping them as one LTL is going to be more cost effective, right? So for us, it's all about just that process of helping customers understand that we're not just shipping every order as it comes out the door. We're optimizing those and having them shipped in the right manner, as well as working on the warehouse and optimizing it. So that's really why we like to have control of the entire supply chain in and out of that facility to do that work. And we tell our customers, measure us against the competition because we think we knock it out of the park 100% of the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, to have a logistics company see the entire thing, they can sort of diagnose where the inefficiencies are. Maybe one last one for you. What do you see as the economic advantages of having maybe sharing a warehouse with other shippers versus having a dedicated, warehouse, and which one do you advise your customers do in most cases?
Yeah, a lot of times for us, what it really boils down to, and the place we want the customers that are going to ship on the same trucks together in the same warehouse, right? Because now we don't have to transfer it in. So we have multiple locations around the Columbus market. And really what we'd like to see is to start putting those customers in the same warehouses with other customers that ship to the same locations, because otherwise we're having to shuttle freight over to the cross dock and move it through the cross dock and touch it extra. And it's still cost effective to do that, but it can be even more effective if they're all in the same building and now we're just loading them out on the same trucks. Now, from a customer perspective, it's all about control, right? We have some customers that have dedicated warehouses, they have dedicated staff. And it's because they're big enough and it makes sense for them. And really, there's not a cost advantage to sharing a larger warehouse with other customers because you're just going to have the same dedicated staff and the same dedicated footprint. But that's really where the advantages come in freight consolidation is limiting the amount of touches and the amount of transfers we have to do to get that freight together on those same trucks. But again, we have millions of square feet of warehousing and it's not like we're looking for a 3 million square foot box to put everything in, so it makes it that much easier. But we are trying to put customers together that ship together to the same locations and save some transfer costs there.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Really depends on the size of the shipper. The economics really change there. So that's very insightful. I really appreciate you coming on the show and having this discussion with me. Where can folks reach out to you and ODW Logistics?
Yeah, my email is phil.schmidbauer@odwlogistics.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach out to us on odwlogistics.com as well on the website. But Mike, I appreciate you having me. It was great to join you, and thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. Hope everyone has a great day.